Hello, and welcome back to Business Communications. I'm Professor LaRue, and today we're going to be going through Module 2 of Communications. Hopefully, this is helpful to help you communicate more effectively in the future. So, the author of the Saylor Academy book goes through a definition of words that have really no meaning except that which you give them. So that I found this interesting because it is true. Unless you are conveying a message through the words that you use, it does make a big difference on how people capture your message. So an example of this is when I first moved to the United States, I knew very little English, and I cannot tell you how many times I used the few words that I did know and strung them along in some kind of sentence and made myself understood. And this technique worked along the years. I became very eloquent in English, and then I tackled French, and I did the same thing, and I became fluent in French also. So a lot of times, by forming the sentence and that you're trying to convey, it goes a long ways. So take a moment to think of to go on an online American English dictionary if you're able to, and look up the last 5 words that might have been added to the dictionary that are actually coming from other languages. So there's millions of them out there that do come, but the last 5 would be interesting to find out where they came from. So there is a good YouTube also on French words that came over to the English language called 10 French Words in English from Get Your Cards. That's an interesting YouTube that talks about different words and where they might be coming from different countries, but making it into the English dictionary. So the messages carry more than literal meaning. So there are 3 types of messages that we use to communicate. So your primary message, and that's an intentional content. The secondary message is actually an unintentional content. And then there's an auxiliary message, and that can be intentional or an unintentional way to communicate. So creating a message, you usually have 5 parts to it. You want an attention statement that's going to catch the audience and draw you in. There's also, of course, the introduction, the body, and the conclusion that we're all very aware of when writing paragraphs or papers. And then there's the residual message. So what do you want your audience to take away after you convey the message? So take a moment to think of someone that had asked you to please take a seat. And how did you interpret that? Did it remind you of when you were in school and one of your teachers asked you to take a seat because you were in trouble? Or did you take it lightly as an everyday conversation? Or is it something that reminds you of work and puts you on alert? So write down what your experience might be to help you understand how sometimes certain types of communications can convey different messages. So the principles of verbal communication, there's three types of rules, and that's syntactic rules, the order on which the words go, the contextual rules, and that's more about the meaning and the words you choose, and there's the semantic rules. So those are more about the meaning of words and how to interpret them. All these need to be considered to be able to communicate the message effectively. Now, reality also shapes the language, but by taking into account your audience and the background, a lot of times it makes a big difference when you become what they call other-oriented. So this also narrows the gap between you and your audience so you can convey the message more clearly. So I do have an example of when I traveled in Africa, and I had a chance to go there to do some traveling for to look get into safaris and talk to the people. And I was among a big tourist group, but I was the one who was more inquisitive. I reached out to every tour guide that we had, and I started asking questions, finding out more about their culture and the animals, and just overall how they operated differently from how we do in the United States. And in turn, I engaged them more in the conversation, so I got some great tips of where to go, where the local food was best, and how to stay out of the touristy spots, and take advantage of the more cultural, local places that they had to offer. So I felt like I narrowed that gap quite a bit and got a much better experience than other tourists that complained that it wasn't as good for them. So language is arbitrary and symbolic. So we have to negotiate the meaning of words many times through visual images or dialogue. And so there's a good YouTube that talks about denotative language versus connotative language called Denote or Connote by Momatrix that you might want to check out and get some more detail on those definitions. And language is also abstract, so you need to focus on the terms that you want to use and the examples. You also need to relate it to reality, so because of biases that we might have. So take a moment to think about maybe 5 of people close to you that you know that drive different cars, and how you associate them based on the car they drive. So that's similar to how we communicate. So based on biases that we might have, we might communicate differently. And so you need to keep that in mind when communicating effectively. So languages also can be considered an obstacle. In the Saylor Academy book describes undesirable results in business due to miscommunication, to the point where they can damage business relationships. They can have loss of productivity in the team that you work with, or conflict, or miss opportunities. So one example of this I can share is when I worked at Kaiser Permanente. I had one of our heads in our group was very thrown back every time that he didn't understand the investors that would come in and try to get us to invest in one of their products. And so he would get very angry if the message wasn't conveyed clearly, and he would start insulting them and yelling at them, and even firing some of the consultants because he just couldn't understand what they were trying to convey to him. And so it had very bad repercussions on some of the products or some of the investments we were trying to invest in. Because of this. So sometimes where you might think it doesn't make that big of a difference, it's communication has to be clear and well delivered, of course, especially for marketing groups, but overall as it is. Now, there are other examples of language that is sometimes deceptive or might actually hurt the message that you're trying to get across. So cliches are one of them. There are lazy communication techniques. There's also jargon, which is an occupation-specific language by people in a project or a group. There's also slang that marketing uses to target certain audiences, or also sexist or racist language that's sometimes used that is disrespectful. There's also euphemisms, and those are vague terms that we often use in business that we want to be clear of or stay away from. And there's a double speak, and that's when you try to hide the meaning of what you're trying to convey. So I definitely suggest thinking of a slang word that you might use, or a euphemism that you might use, that you might want to start taking it out of your context if you're trying to deliver a clear message across. And there's also emphasis and strategies in this module where they suggest using visual communication or dialogue to get your message across. So I teach Excel in a lot of my business courses, which I find has great tools for showing graphs and rather than numbers or a picture. So there is a good YouTube called Sal Caselli's Excel tutorial in 30 minutes that has been super useful. I show it all in all my math classes. But that Excel is a great tool for doing this. And there's also things like signposts, which are keywords to alert audiences of a change in topic, or there's internal summaries to help the audience keep track of where they were at in the message, or repetition to drive a message home. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you again on the next module. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.